person who actually hired me in my first position, he told me you need to get involved in network groups. So when I was working with someone in tax, I'd call the Chicago Tax Club. When it was a CPA, I'd call the Illinois CPA Society. And I was about a year in and ended up working on a director of Treasury position with a very well-known company here in Chicago. And someone gave me the name Norm Goldstein. I said Norm, which I'm sure many people know, is like the Justin Bieber of Treasury in Western Illinois. So I reached out, and I don't even know if I haven't talked to him forever, but I reached out to Norm and said, hey, I hear you know a lot of people. And Norm gave me another person, Dan, I forget his last name, and said, you know, I don't know anyone right now, but call Dan. Dan gave me somebody else, and I played like a game of telephone with Treasury professionals for probably about 2 weeks. I spoke to more people than I can even remember, but ended up finding a director of Treasury through this organization within, again, my first year within the industry. So I've been involved for the last 12 years with a lot of networking groups, and one of the things that really stood out about this one was just how many people wanted to help others within the group and how close knit the group is. So it's been a few years. I've been working in revenue cycle for healthcare and technology. Still oversee our treasury and finance and accounting practice, but I'm happy to be here. And again, I've always thought really good things about the organization, and made a commission on my placement. So I probably owe some drinks to some folks within the room here, within within my career. But my name is Ryan Langley. I am the I'm sorry, I may have to fix this here. But I'm the Senior Director of Finance, Accounting, and Technology Practice here within Kforce in Northern Illinois. There we go. There we go. And I graduated, actually, I had my bachelor's in finance. Where can I stand over here so I'm not blocking myself? I have a bachelor's in finance, graduated from Waltham, the University of Waltham, Massachusetts. Studied to be a CFA, studied for my CFA first thing out of school. Realized that that was not my calling. Did pretty horrible at it. Got out of financial analysis. Actually worked for Bank of Mellon, New York. Sorry, it was Mellon Bank at the time. And I did return-based analytics for their mutual fund company, Dreyfus. Ended up getting out of that business and got into sales and consulting for about 5 years. And then I moved to Chicago, and in 2007 got into staff augmentation. And I put this snapshot up here, not just to talk about myself, but I think one of the things I really wanted to point out, I've been able to, and very fortunate to meet with over 2,700 hiring managers in Northern Illinois. A decade of that is all finance and accounting and revenue cycle within healthcare, and the last 2 years within technology. So I've been able to, been very fortunate to meet with some amazing leaders within Northern Illinois. I've seen some great cultures, I've seen some great practices. All the things that you're going to see here today are things that I have taken and ideas from some of the great companies that I've partnered with. A lot of actually who are in this room today. I may not be you particularly, but individuals within these finance and accounting departments that are hiring really some great people, that are right out of school or within that Gen Z and millennial generation. And I've seen some really bad leadership too. I've seen some really bad places to work. So it's interesting. You get really, I think, a good scope of the landscape within Northern Illinois and who some good companies are, and then organizations that maybe have some work in order to make sure they can attract the top talent. And I live in Arlington Heights. Can't see it at the bottom, but I have a wife who tolerates me. 3 boys. Ages 4, 2, and 1. So when I'm not at an event like this, or when I'm not working or leading my team, I'm usually pretty crazy at home with three boys under the age of 5. So what we're going to cover today, first we're going to go through a generational breakdown. So we're going to actually talk a little bit about all the different generations. There's actually a mashup generation between Gen X as well as millennials called Xennials that I think a lot of people don't know about. I kind of consider myself someone that's in between those generations. I'm going to talk a little bit about what's changed. I think the hiring landscape, even the last 2 or 3 years has changed drastically with social media. I've noticed myself having to really find and attract individuals, changing every 2 or 3 years what I'm doing, whether it's within social media or how I'm hiring or my process. And we've seen some really, like I said, some really great practices from some companies. But we're going to talk about the landscape and how that's changed in the last couple of years. I'm going to talk about hiring. So again, how do you find folks? You know, right now, unemployment within Illinois is 3.8%. Nationally, it's 3.7%. And usually, you know, Illinois, because we have areas, I know Rockford is over 5% and other parts of the state that are higher. Usually, there's more of a disparity with the state of Illinois and the national unemployment rate. But it is hard to find good people right now. The supply just really isn't out there. And again, your hiring process. We'll talk a little bit about motivational management. What are some of the things that newer folks out of school like to do, and how do they get motivated? If you notice, I didn't name this millennial. I think there's probably more and more articles and things that you see out there about millennials. There's a lot of folks with some very positive or negative views about that entire generation. I did this speech actually a couple years ago, something similar to the speech at a healthcare summit, and I named it millennials, and then I started realizing the millennial generation has actually been in the workforce since 2002. It's been 16 years. So if you think about that, I kind of came to this epiphany of why are we still talking about something 16 years later, that, you know, if you think about you've had folks that are working for 16 years and you're still trying to figure out how to motivate them, it's a hard thing to do. No one's trying to figure out, you know, socks right now and what are we going to do about that. There's some things that have happened in 16 years that will help us move on to Gen Z. Then we're going to talk about retaining top talent and just some stuff that, you know, we do within our company to have some fun. Again, I've really taken a lot of this, and I'm unfortunately not able to share some of the company names, but I will be able to share some of the things that we're doing internally that I've been able to take from, again, some of the organizations that you saw within the intro page that we work with here. So this is see this. So this is a generational breakdown. A lot of people, you know, don't hear too much about the lost generation or the interbellum generation. Obviously, those folks are the workforce, and you know, those individuals, you know, we're very lucky if we have them still in our life. You know, over to the age of 103, 105 years old. The greatest generation and the silent generation. I think a lot of people have grandparents, great-grandparents that are in that generation. The baby boomer generation, you know, obviously folks that, you know, after the war, people were making babies. And I think we've seen a lot about baby boomers coming out of the workforce and retiring and who are taking over those positions within the workforce. Baby bust, which kind of offended me when I first saw that. So I'm a Gen Xer myself, but obviously, you know, 1965 to 79, that's actually my generation. I was born in 1979. Zennials, has anyone heard that term? A lot of people that haven't heard it. I hadn't heard of that up until recently, but it really is a generation that are Gen Xers like myself that grew up in the 80s and Michael Jackson and Alf and all the great things that happened in that time frame.
Can I ask questions?
Sure.
What is Zennial the only generation on here that has an overlapping year span?
No, if you look at the top one here, there's an overlap within interbellum as well as lost generation. Okay. By the way, that's a good question. So there is no definite, like, this is the year.
Right.
You're going to find different years. So I'm actually a millennial in a couple different surveys. The data that you're going to see here today, by the way, is not just from obviously the companies, but there's four main places that I go to get the data you're going to see here today. There's the census. There's Deloitte, because they're very credible and do a very good job with statistics. There's Glassdoor and LinkedIn. So if I just Googled it, like, everyone is going to have a different one. But it is a really good question.
Okay.
And again, so I think, you know, it's more of Gen Xers that do relate to millennials that are out there. Or maybe it's people like me that are a Gen Xer and think I'm cool and try to be more like a millennial. But, then the millennial generation, again, as you can see, ages between 24 and 38. Gen Z, and they're entering the workforce right now, you know, Gen Z. And then Gen Alpha, that's where my kids are. Obviously, we have quite a while before they did the workforce. But again, it's really good to see. And again, if you're born in 1980 or 1978, you sort of look at a certain website, it may tell you you're a different generation. So what has changed? I think one of the things that you know, I want to have some fun with here is, you know, how communication has changed through the years. So if you were part of the lost generation and you were writing a letter to someone and you were looking to reach out to them, it would look like something like this: "Dear Strike." This is, you know, late 1800s. People are very proper. It's very endearing. It's very caring. You get to the silent generation, you drop the dearest, and it's still very proper. Dear Mr. or Dear Mr. Langley. They threw the Mr. in there. It's a little bit more proper. The baby boomers, after the war, a lot of people were writing Dear John letters, so it came Dear Ryan. So still, again, Still proper, but you add the first name, you get rid of the last name. Gen X, we started getting pretty cool. She's on big things in her life. So we were MTV came, people started listening to rap. The millennials, for some reason, the millennials love misspelling things on purpose. And they also like throwing in numbers as much as they can. So it became, what's up, R to the Langs? And if you notice, it's not even a shortcut. It's actually longer than anything else out there. And then Gen Z, which I know is going to probably get a little scary, but they just use emojis. So, you know, they're not going to even use your name. They're just going to send a picture of a kangaroo. You know, other thing that's changed, and this was actually something that really stuck out to me, this is actually through the census, is the percentage of the population with degrees by gender. If you look back, you know, 20, 30, 40 years, obviously there were more men getting degrees than there were women. Starting in 2014, there are more females actually graduating with 4-year degrees. So if that is, you know, 4-year degrees, someone that you're looking to hire, your population, you're going to start seeing a lot more females than you are males. That's the disparity here with, again, it's only 1% here. But unfortunately, I wanted to give a lot more years, but you're going to be able to see it. But, you know, when you're talking about, you know, 80s, 90s, I mean, the disparity was 5 to 10% men over women, and, you know, women had taken over in 2014. Now, I know, obviously, this, you know, there's a lot of pay disparity and things that, you know, as an economy we need to still work on. But, you know, I think this is a really cool thing for me to point out when I saw this. I think this is probably one of the most important things I like to show. So I think that whenever we're trying to attract folks, and typically, I mean, if you're a hiring manager and you're trying to find someone, you know, even 5 years ago, it was, hey, I need to write an amazing job description. Like, that's what I need to focus on. I need to make it great. I need to give it to my HR team. And this is what's going to attract somebody. We had a meeting with Glassdoor. And if you haven't been on Glassdoor to check out your company page and the reviews, it's amazing. It's something that almost everyone now looks at when they decide where they're going to work. And we met with them 2 weeks ago. So we went out to California, we met with Glassdoor, LinkedIn, Google,